Welcome to Crafting Transformation. My name is Jürgen Mühlbacher and I'm the host of this episode. In the second season, Becoming a Transformer, we talk to people what slow means and how to become a transformer oneself. We share their valuable insights, learn from them, and make ourselves on the way to found our own slow hotel. If you want to follow our path, just check out our Instagram or YouTube channel and you see the latest developments. But first, we have this interesting interview from Mallorca for you. In this episode, you will learn how a trip around the world led to find your personal passion, what the environment you are living in and the curated interior design have in common, and what slow life is about. So, enjoy listening. Welcome to Crafting Transformation. Today I'm speaking in Mallorca to Thomas Bossert and Melissa Rosenbauer. Thank you for your time.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, you found Espanyolet, I think, 8 years ago. And before you came to found Espanyolet and also make this special journey, maybe we can start off with what you did before, because you're both from the US, you worked in the US. I mean, Thomas, you're German.
I'm German, but I left after I finished my studies in Germany. I left to the US. That was actually in '93 already. So, and I lived in the US for almost 20 years, or a little more than 20 years.
Yep, and we were working at a digital agency, doing advertising, branding, marketing, large company in New York, and we met in 2012.
In New York.
So it was a really big company, a big city as well.
Yeah.
Big city, big company.
Yeah.
Lots of work and crazy
crazy
life.
hours. Yeah. Not a whole lot of time to stop and, kick off your shoes and walk through the grass. That was not a part of our daily lives.
But then you decided to give your life a completely new direction, or at least it seems really like a completely turn in your career when you started from Brooklyn to Bali to Berlin and the Balears.
Yeah, so very early on into our relationship, Thomas had asked me if I was interested in living elsewhere. And of course I was. I had been fantasizing about living a life outside the US, but it never actually happened. So we kind of cooked up this plan. Maybe we would do part of our life in New York and part of our life, I don't know, in Tulum, Mexico. But we just couldn't find a way to make that a reality. So about 6-9 months into our relationship, we were sitting in the executive meeting and the guy who was the head of our London office announced that he was getting married and taking a year off to travel the world with his new wife. And we kind of looked at each other and said, that's what we're going to do. So it took quite a bit of time to get all of that organized. We're not impulsive people, I would say. We like to plan and think and, kind of get things organized. So we had a lot of ducks in a row. So we told our company at least 6 months beforehand that we'd be leaving, and Thomas sold his apartment. We put everything in storage and we traveled. But it's important to mention that the way we wanted to travel was not to see the world. Of course, we wanted to get out of New York and experience different cultures, but we had a list of things that we wanted to accomplish, not places we wanted to see. So on that list was learn a new language, work with our hands, get in touch with our spiritual side,
give back, do
nothing, and be more a part of nature. So the places that we chose for our year-long sabbatical were based on those pillars.
And we usually stayed in one place for a month at least. So in Bali, we were 2 months because we did a lot of work there. Ceramics, dyeing of fabrics and stuff. So we didn't move around a lot. We just worked, really, but totally different life.
Yeah, you did two different things as well, no? I mean, you did a lot with clay
I did the ceramics. Yeah, I was in a ceramic studio in Bali for 2 months, and Melissa was doing the dyeing and, printing and, traditional methods in Bali. And it was very interesting because nobody spoke English or anything. She did everything without speaking, really.
Yeah, there was a lot of miming and holding fabric up and pointing. And I realized in these traditional textile studios that the women are not allowed to do certain things. So I said, no, I want to do the printing. And they said, no, that's for men. So I kind of figured out and used my ignorance of the lack of language to go in and start printing my own stuff. But it was a really, really exciting time for us because we had a scooter, driving on the other side of the road. I dropped Thomas every morning at the ceramic studio, and then I drove another 20, 30 minutes outside town to go to the Indigo and the Batik studios. And we loved it. We absolutely loved it.
Well, already there, we decided that we wouldn't go back to New York and that we would do something different, and that we wanted to figure out how to do, build a little business working with our hands.
And how was it like, because you both came from a rather digital background from New York, how was it to work with your hands once again, or in that intensity?
No, it was fantastic because, when I started in graphic design, actually, I did a lot with my hands still. I did a lot of designing. Then I did a lot of designing on the computer. But by the time we met, we're both in executive positions, and our lives were really meetings, PowerPoint presentations and dealing with clients, right? So there isn't a lot of doing anymore. You oversee people, obviously, but it's not, it's management, really. So, and we were missing the actual doing, with or without hands, but, we love the idea of using our hands and, being closer to nature that way too. And that's why we love the really old materials too. A lot of the linen we work with is like 80 to 100 years old. It's all, very a different world, different quality. And our pieces, even before we work with them, they already have a history. Their whole life already lived.
That's something truly special if you have so much, culture and nature embedded in your hands when you're working with a material as well.
Yeah. It was really, I think we decided very quickly. We didn't know exactly what it would be, and our first idea for our company was actually cloth and clay as a name, to have both textiles and ceramics in there. And we did a lot of ceramics in the past, but we stopped doing that because it's impossible to ship. Stuff is heavy and breaks all the time, even if you double pack. It was just not working. And also, the fabrics are sensitive, and if you have a lot of dirt and clay around them, they don't love it. But so we did that. We had a really good time in Africa, in Thailand as well. We spent a whole month in Thailand doing nothing on a little island and just
scuba diving, snorkeling.
Yeah, we did stuff, but no.
Kayaking. But it was definitely a turn from the lives that we had been living, and I didn't know anything else. I had lived in cities most of my life. I'd lived in San Francisco for 4 years, in New York for 4 years, and you just take for granted that that's what your life is like. And so cranking back and stopping and not having meetings to go to and not having phone calls to pick up and deal with was really, really refreshing. And it was one of those really wide-eyed moments in Bali where we said, we're not going to go back. To be honest, we already had a hunch that we might not come back. So I sold everything I had and got rid of all the responsibilities. I sold my apartment, my car, I canceled most of my bank accounts, my insurance policies, everything. So when we left, there was nothing. We had brought our lives down to like almost zero, which was also extremely refreshing.
that all you're in a moment where like there's nobody, I don't have any payments to make. There's nobody asking anything. I can just go, and what happens, right?
But how was it? I mean, like, it sounds so easy if you tell it now, but I assume if you're in that process, you're in work, you tell your friends, okay, I'm leaving everything behind. I mean, how was it for your whole social environment, but also for you to go that step?
Well, I think there are a few decisions, for people who are listening to this. I'm glad that you pointed that out. It's so easy for us to talk about right now, but there's reality. And when I told my parents, for example, that we were doing this, my father's first question was, have you thought about how you'll re-enter the workspace? And I love my father, but that's the conditioning. That's the conventional way of thinking, right? You take a year off, but then you're going to be so far behind. And there were two important things for me. Number one, I'd fallen in love. And so when you fall in love, you believe that anything is possible. So you want to be with this person 24/7. And so you feel excited about whatever ideas are coming together as a couple. And number two, I thought, New York is always going to be there. We leave New York, and if we travel and we decide that we don't love it, New York will be here. We'll come back to it. And so there was an excitement, number one, the being in love, and then there was the reassuring kind of safety net of this place will always be here. So yes, it took a lot to put everything in storage and to sell everything and to tell friends that we would be leaving. But there was a fear and there was an excitement, and the excitement won out.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of our friends said the same thing. They said, oh, this is a great idea. I could never do it, And we're like, why not? Because, I mean, it is a life decision, and you might have to, you're in your mind, you're actually backstepping a little bit, you're going backwards, you're not on the career ladder, you're not advancing, you're not making more money. I mean, you're actually going back a little bit, but you gain so much more, so many other things. And it's a bit, I mean, obviously it's easier because we don't have kids. And, we didn't have a lot of responsibilities. So by cutting all those ties, it wasn't that difficult. But we have friends here in Mallorca, lots of them that did that with kids too, Yeah. Really good friends of ours in our neighborhood, they were on a boat for 4 years with 3 kids. Yeah. So it is all possible, but I mean, you have to want it, and it's not for everybody, right? Some people might like the security of the job and the house and not wanting to leave their neighborhood, and other people might want a little bit of an adventure. And it really changes your perspective on life, if you leave not only your country. I mean, I had done it already by moving from Germany to the US, but then again, I call this my third life. And, doing it again, now being in Spain, but also the traveling, it just opens your perspective a lot. And every time I change, I feel like I'm less German, because, I mean, and I'm not, it's not like, Melissa asked me the other day, do you feel like you're losing your cultural identity? And I said, yeah, probably, but I don't think that's a negative thing necessarily. I don't feel like it's a loss. I feel like I'm gaining so much else. I'm gaining other cultural perspectives and other cultural identities. I would probably say today I'm more American than I'm German. But it's a big step. But I mean, what you get when you travel and give yourself a little time to live, not just rushing from meeting to meeting, or from dinner to dinner or school for the kids, is like you gain, you're getting in touch with yourself in a totally different level, and you probably don't want to go back after that.
That's really interesting that you end with that sentence, because I wanted to go into that direction now, because you said you changed from the career path to something else, and you got more out of life, also working with your hands, getting more spiritual. So what was the change you had personally from that year abroad?
I always felt like I was different than my peer group, and I felt a struggle between needing to or being pulled or pushed into a conventional life. So when I traveled, it felt so good to be doing things that were different and things that made me feel uncomfortable. And there were a few times during our travels where I felt uncomfortable, and my first reaction was to kind of hunker down and go back to a place that felt a little more comfortable. But then after that hardship, and it sounds very cliche, but oftentimes you grow more through challenges. So in Africa, we actually felt a little sick because we had to take the malaria pills. And we weren't feeling well for a while, and we felt very uncomfortable. We're like, oh gosh, what are we doing here? And we don't even have a map, and we don't know where we're going, and we're sleeping on top of our truck. And it was very overwhelming, but we got through it. And I felt so proud of myself. I felt really proud of myself. And it sounds like a strange thing to say as an adult. At the time, I was 35. But to do something where you pat yourself on the back and you say, you got through it and you did something hard, and now you feel so good, and that you took the road less the road less traveled. And I felt like I grew as an adult, as a human, as someone who could get through difficult things and get to the other side, and then just be so excited that I was doing that. And it wasn't what everyone else was doing.
That's true. I mean, we're all conditioned, to our social norms wherever we live. So you expect this and this and this, but when you go to a different place, like when we were in Bali, for example, there is a lot of spirituality all around you. It's not just you or what you do, or if you do yoga or not. I mean, it doesn't matter, because the whole environment is spiritual. I mean, we had rented a little house, and it was on the grounds of another Balinese person. And that made them responsible for us, for example, right? So they were responsible for our well-being, our safety, everything. So they brought us offerings every day. They made sure that we weren't bothered. Their dog came by to check in on us. I mean, it was like, it's a totally different, all of a sudden the whole community is responsible for you. And I thought that was really interesting, and kind of to see how else it could be done, right? And how just another place might do it completely differently. And maybe people are not, in the same rat race. They're more compassionate. Their religion is completely different, and they're really, good people in a very different environment. And to see that in different places is really interesting, because you all of a sudden, the way you lived isn't the only way anymore. Obviously a step from Germany to the US isn't that big, right? It's very different in the US, but it's still, we're still talking about similar values, and, in terms of work, very similar environments, and the drive and all that. But I thought that was really interesting, and really changed what I was expecting from life and how I want to live too. But just by seeing how other people live and how it can be done differently and still feel really good or better or different.
And before you decided to live differently here on Mallorca, you also had a stop in Berlin, I think, for a few months.
Yeah. We did. Our travel blog was originally called Brooklyn to Berlin. I think because I thought that we would end up in Berlin. I don't know why. I had never been to Berlin, but I was enamored with the city. From what I had read and all the culture and the feeling that I had got, the craziness of the city. I like a little bit of chaos. So yeah, we planned our around the world trip to kind of end up for 3 months in Berlin. And we rented a beautiful apartment, and we built a textile studio in the apartment. And we started with a lot of tests, and we enjoyed our time there. We spent time on bikes and exploring the city. But one day, as we were kind of winding up our time, we had like a 3-month lease on this apartment. We had to decide where we were going next. And I loved it and I wanted to stay. But I think I did realize, here's another big city, you know? And do we choose to live in a place based on what we want to do, or do we choose to live in a place based on how we want to live? And I could tell that Thomas wasn't totally on board with this kind of lifestyle that we were living. It didn't feel like New York. It felt very different from New York, but again, it was still a big city.
And it was Germany.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't know what I was thinking, but when we were there, we were looking for a new life, right? A new life together. And when I got there, or we got there, it didn't feel like a new life to me, right? It was an exciting place, but it was like an old life. It was like, oh, I've done this before, you know? These people are all German, and I know the culture, I know the social norms, and it all felt very, very much like an old life. It was also very cold already.
We were there in the summer.
Yeah, we're like, we don't want just cold weather. No, when our friends then said, hey, if you like, you know, the energy of Berlin, but you want it to be warmer and maybe a little more exotic, why don't you go to Barcelona? And that's what we did. We then moved to Barcelona, and we spent some time there, and we learned Spanish. We started learning Spanish, and it was still a big spread out city, you know, and we're like, this is too big for us. Maybe we want something slower. We want something a little easier, and a little more nature. So that's when we came over here, because, you know, Palma is sort of a mini Barcelona, and it's much quieter, and it's an island. And
well, and also, you know, thinking about what you guys are doing and the lives, the people that you're interviewing and crafting transformations and talking about the slow life, I wasn't ready to take that step down, but Thomas definitely was. And so, again, back to my American upbringing and the life that I was accustomed to, it was go, 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 run, 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 city, city, city. And I couldn't imagine living in the countryside or in a smaller city. I lived in smaller cities, but still with a fast pace. And so Thomas really encouraged us to come back to that list of what we wanted to do while we were traveling. Take it easy, slow down, work with our hands, you know, be in touch with nature, get in touch with our spirituality, do nothing. These were important things. We couldn't just go from one life and then spend a year traveling and then go back to that fast-paced life. So it took me a long time to get used to that and to kind of uncrank and wind down from that go, go, go pace. And I didn't enjoy it at first. It was difficult for me to get used to it. But, you know, then once I started to see the benefits of taking it easy and slowing down and not being so focused on work, I really started to kind of blossom a little bit.
One, I mean, there's a 10-year age difference between us. So I had already spent 10, 12 years more in the workforce. And I was definitely ready to slow down a little bit, or at least work differently, because it's not necessarily working less, it's just working differently. And, you know, being your own boss also. I mean, I had a company before with, you know, 10 people, which is not easier than working in a big company. But anyway, I thought it, I really liked it, but I saw her struggling. It was the pace, you know, and a lot of people, there's a huge international community here, but they're all here for a reason, right? They're all here because they want to do life a little differently and not necessarily speed it up. So that was a little hard and took a adjustment, not for me, but for Melissa. And that's why then for a while, we had an apartment in Berlin where we were going back and forth a little bit. And we had some projects there, and then some projects here. But over time, it was clear that this is our base, and this is where we make. We didn't make anything in Berlin, we were just there. And so we decided over time that this is our base. And that's when we started investing here, and we bought a little house, and then we started making very different decisions. When you decide you're here, then all of a sudden your decisions are very different. You invest more in friendships, you invest more in your house, in your studio, and everything because you're here. And I think that was the problem in the beginning, especially for Melissa, that she hadn't decided that this is it. Right? It was always like, oh, what if it's there? What if it's there? What if it's there? Right? So you're never really here. And once we decided, no, even if it doesn't have to be forever, but for now, we're here. And then our decision making really changed.
And how did Espanyolet develop? Because you said you got here to Mallorca, you started your first project. You also said you work differently, so not necessarily less, but slower. Mm-hmm. How did that all develop and brought you to the point where we are now?
Well, we came here. I mean, we had already done a lot of textile work in Berlin, but it was very different because you're in a city, you're in an apartment. Also, we hadn't found our key ingredient, right? We hadn't found the material that we really loved and wanted to work with. And when we got here, we were looking, and like this stuff over here, we started finding what is called drap here, and that is basically old linen that people had everywhere in their basements, and that was used for bedding or mattresses or other things in the past. And it's very roughly, rough, and it was in people's basement. And if you look at it, you cannot find anything like it today. We looked really hard.
We've been looking for 8 years. And everywhere we look, it can't compare to the vintage fabrics.
To the vintage stuff. And it also took the dye really well. And it took us a while to figure out how we would dye and what our specialty is. And we actually were painting our dyes. They're not dipped or in a bath. So that way we can control the color. So we use a thickener, like algae, and make the dye basically into paste, and then we can totally control the color. We can, even draw lines or gradations or mix multiple colors or these paintings behind us. This is all textile dye. There's nothing on top of the fabric. It's all in the fabric, so it gives you a very different texture. So it took us a while to kind of find our niche and also figure out how to do it and how to make the dye stick. And so we started slow, and then we got discovered very early on by a couple of companies, one of them Restoration Hardware in the US. They're a big company. And they wanted us to help them bring color to their stores because they're very monocolor. And they're like, we need some color in the stores. Can you help us? And we're very flattered and excited about it. And, we started thinking about how we could scale what we're doing. And for a couple of days, we're like, oh, okay, we're going to go, we're going to buy our materials in India, and we hire art students to paint and this and that. And then all of a sudden, we're like, what are we doing? This is exactly what we didn't want to do. We just left New York and the rat race and all that. And we don't want to have employees. We don't want to have all that, And then the Restoration Hardware was asking, well, so what's your maximum daily output? And we're like, what?
Terrifying.
Terrifying.
We were terrified. And so
we said no.
It's, I think to to talk about Espanyolet is not about talking about a business, but in a way, kind of a choice that we've made, and a choice that we've made to focus on creativity and on making. And so had we made that choice to go with restoration hardware, it would have been to build a business. And we've built businesses before, like Thomas was saying, and we can't work at that pace. And this island doesn't support working at that pace either. And so why would we be here? So our original studio, we're here in the neighborhood of Son Espanyolet here in Palma, and our original studio was just up the street in our house. And it's a slow way of living. It's a community, it's a neighborhood, and why would we try to create something in a place where there was some dissonance, fast pace versus slow living? And when we paint and when we create, it's like meditation for us. We mix the colors, we wait a long time for them to develop, we cut the fabric, we wash the fabric, we iron the fabric, we paint the fabric, we put it outside to dry. There is a very slow process of making, and it does become a meditation for us. So I think we had to come to terms with, yes, of course, it had to be a business. We have to make a living, but not in a way that maybe New York or Berlin would mean making a business.
Yeah, I know our footprint here is much smaller. Our costs are not very high. So we kept it very small so we don't have to work like crazy people. But our business has changed drastically over the last couple of years, I have to say, because we started with the textiles, and then we started selling them wholesale in the US as well, which we stopped doing because it was just too much. If somebody orders 150 pillows, it's not fun anymore for us, to paint 150 pillows. Yeah. So it's not fun anymore. And also our business naturally developed a little more into the interior design direction, because we started making pillows, then headboards, then curtains, and then we found a good way of applying our color to walls, and we're working a lot with lime and texture. And so when we started all that, people just asked us, can't you just do the rest? Now if you have done the walls and the bed and the bedding and the cushions and everything, can you just do the rest? And we did, and then we have our own style. It's very Mediterranean, but modern Mediterranean, and people loved it. So then we started doing our materials, which is now our special sauce. But also we started buying and inviting other makers. So the way we think we're differentiating ourselves is by saying we do interior design by makers. So when we go into space, we don't necessarily think about what we can buy or purchase. It's more about what can we make to fit this space, and what can we get other people to make for this space. We get people to make tables out of vintage wood, or lamps out of ceramics, and we design the lamps and they make them. And so it's a lot about like what fits the space and what can we make and what are cool textures and colors. And so it naturally developed into that area, which is good because the materials we're using are they're running out. It's not scalable really because it's all vintage. So we're now, have people looking for us in Eastern Europe, and it's still possible, but it's definitely not gonna last forever.
Well, that's also some kind of, I would say, craftsmanship in itself, because the material you're using, especially the linen, is also quite old. It has a really old history, as you mentioned before, and therefore it's a lot of crafting itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, and we like to talk about being craftsmen and being artisans, because there's no copy paste. There's no way to make or do what we do quickly or without a lot of thought and heart, really, because we're working with materials that are scarce resources. Every house is different. A lot of these old stone houses have funny walls and funny rooms, and the bathroom is outside, and the terrace is half covered and blocked by an olive tree or a pine tree. And how do we work within these things that are uniquely Majorcan, but also the result of craftsmanship that came from years ago? And we really, it's a joy to be able to see these homes and to touch them and their history and honor that heritage. So no, we do for sure consider ourselves craftsmen and makers, and not people who are, buy things just to make a home pretty. It really is about the soul and honoring everything that this island has brought us in terms of inspiration.
Yeah.
Is it also how you would design a slow interior, or how would you define it?
Well, I mean, we're very, very lucky in that our clients find us because I think they see in us their ethos, their philosophy as well. So we're laid back. I think we're really easy to be with. The process is very collaborative. We don't like to go off and do things on our own. We like the clients to be a part of it. We've been very, very lucky with the clients who have found us. And so it takes time, but that doesn't mean it's more expensive. It just takes time because, number one, we're on an island. Number two, when we're searching, it's like a treasure hunt. Who are the right people who can be our makers, from the vintage wood to the ceramics to going to the other side of the island and meeting with people and really discovering the natural resources that we have here on the island that we can bring into a home and make it richer and more textured and more colorful. So yeah, it's slower.
It's slower.
It's
slow. I mean, it's for us, it's a little bit slow making because we want to take our time for the clients as well, and also for the things that we're getting made. If you want to have a table made out of wood in Sawyer on the island, then it's going to take 3 or 4 months to get that table made. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't order it on a website, but you can design it and you can pick the wood, and your clients can be part of it. Then they go and they pick the wood, and it's like a little, they will forever remember when they sit at that table that they picked it, and they went to see how it's made, and it's like a whole little story, right? Or lamps, we had like a client here in Ietas, and for them we designed lamps out of ceramic, and they were made in a ceramic studio here in Palma. And they went and they saw it, and all the little tricks that went into it. They were getting too heavy, so we put coffee in the clay that burns off in the firing process, so they actually lighter in the end. You can make them bigger, stuff like that. So these are all those stories that they now tell about their own house, right? It's like it creates a whole story for them, for us, and for the house or the apartment as well, because it's really, we're trying to bring the outside in. We honor the space that they're in, the island. So it's all slow in a way.
It's really cool how you say it, because you bring in nature itself, but also the environment and the specifics of not just the island, but also each place itself. So you make it really truly unique. Mm-hmm. Are there, for our listeners, any tips you could give them how they could do that at home? So if they, have a new apartment, move in, and want to bring in some of their surrounding?
Well, my favorite thing is to always carry my little snippers around in our car, in our purse, and when it's legal, obviously, scissors. Go snip a little piece of an olive branch. The mastic tree here has beautiful leaves with little berries. The wildflowers that grow out of the stones. I mean, we walk our dog through Geneva where we live, and there's wildflowers just growing out of stone and the asphalt, nowhere, and just snip them and bring them inside and put them, in teeny tiny little jam jars. We collect these little yogurt jars and put the wildflowers in there and put a big olive branch just on top of a armoire. There's great ways to bring the outside in, and it feels just fresh, and you have that scent of the island inside.
Yeah, and you just have to go into it with your eyes open. I mean, obviously, when we did a few things in Berlin, our style was very different. But we managed to mix it, like our special sauce, with the aesthetics of Berlin as well. So, when people came into our apartment, they felt like, they said like, oh, it feels like I'm on vacation, But obviously, there's not the same colors and there's not the same nature there. And, the city is harder. It's grayer in a way. And so, but if you look around, if you're outside, and you explore your environment, you get a feel for what's there, right? And which colors you might want to bring in and which textures you might want to bring in. I mean, here, for example, if we walk around the neighborhood, you will see that all the walls are sort of worn down and they're all warm, kind of soft colors, but they're all worn down. So if you take that idea inside, we do a wall with lime, and we try and kind of recreate that feel, right? It's a little worn down looking, and the colors are warm and soft. And so you kind of bring that whole feel of the neighborhood a little bit inside.
I would also like to say that vintage shopping and flea markets are really, really important because it's a piece of history that might not be yours, but there's history infused in that object. And it's been loved before, it's been used before. There's something about picking up a piece of culture that might not be your own. An American picking up, a Spanish piece of glass, it brings a little bit of that culture into our home. A German having, Thomas had some really great flea market finds from Brooklyn where we lived, and we brought those over. So we have a few pieces sprinkled throughout our house here. So old pieces found really kind of round out a story. And I think going
found in your neighborhood.
Yeah, vintage markets and flea markets and keeping your eyes, ears, and open with neighbors, and even maybe looking at what people have put on the street. You can repair your own chairs, and we love doing that. It's a way to really make your house feel like it's got a story.
Yeah, and maybe don't be afraid of getting something custom made. For example, if you're not finding what you want, or sometimes things that you find don't fit the space necessarily. You might have an odd corner in your house, and you want to get something made for that, and it's often not more expensive, and it's much more unique, and you can be part of the process, no matter where you are, if you're in Germany, Austria, or here, you always find a metalsmith or somebody who can build you something out of wood that's special, or maybe you have the wood and you want to make something out of it, so your piece has a history.
Or make it yourself. Give it a try. We've made a lot of things ourselves, and sometimes if it doesn't work out the first time, then you try again. And that's really satisfying as well. You find, and you might be surprised that you're good at things that you've never tried before.
Yeah, it's really cool to go in the process as well, because at home we have our apartment and also made some things our own, or as you said before, the flea market. So we brought some things from Vienna, which has really nice old furniture, and it fits in perfectly, but it also makes a picture complete, kind of.
Yeah, it makes it more unique. Then you know the story behind this piece and where it came from, and it's different than going to IKEA or to a furniture store that just sells like normal stuff. It doesn't have a story.
And we find that when we go into people's homes, they're always very excited to tell us, oh, did you know that this was my uncle's piece and he traveled around the world with it? Or, oh my gosh, I found this. And then this great dog came up to me and there's this story that just feels like it's their story. And people get really excited about found objects and bringing in a piece from outside into their home and then living with it, making it their own.
That's kind of interesting what you're saying there, because, usually we perceive like new items are more valuable, but the emotional value of older items, especially the history and what they tell you, and I also got the feeling a little bit like they have a soul itself. I mean, you can't really say that about an object, but kind of.
Yeah, of course.
They.
Yeah.
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 Definitely.
No,
it's different.
I'll never forget. We went to the flea market in Bossert every single Sunday in Berlin for 2 years. Not every single Sunday, but every Sunday we were there. And we looked for lamps. And we would end up without lamps every single Sunday because we couldn't find the perfect thing. And then one of our last Sundays in Berlin, we found 3 lamps. And those pieces became so special because we worked really hard to find them. It took a long time. And then they felt like they were ours because they were our little treasures that we had hunted for so long. And it makes the picture complete. And you also feel excited. Again, it's an object, but it was someone else's. And it wasn't there week after week. And then it appeared and it became yours. So there's an excitement about that and newfound ownership.
That's really beautiful how you say that. You're also working a lot with different artists or craftsmen around the island and probably also different regions as well. How is the way you cooperate with these craftsmen? Because thinking from the business point of view, it's often if you have a company, you try to make as much yourself as you can, and here you got a more creative, cooperative way of doing things.
I mean, we like making and we like custom things for houses, because it does reflect the island and the culture and all of this here. And it isn't really about us making as much as we can ourselves, right? It's more like what fits the space, because we see the space as a little art piece. So if we feel like it needs something that we can make, which is often the case, then we find people who can, and people that we really like. I mean, where we like their work, And then we usually cooperate in the design as well, and what's possible, and how it can be made. And we usually have an idea about texture and color. We know, we want this to fit this space, and they need to be an earth color, or they need to be, like a dirty rose. And then we have ideas about the texture, and then we try and work with the craftsmen here to get there, And that's also nice because, we have the initial impulse, but what comes back is just as much theirs as it is ours.
Yeah. And the way that we find people and that we choose to work, at the risk of sounding, kind of cosmic about this, but it really is about the energy of those people, because this is our life's work. And we can't work with people who don't have our same philosophy and ethos. So we have to like the person as well and see eye to eye on what will the timing be and what is your way of working, and let's understand and respect each other that it might not be fast or it might not be exactly the way. We're not dictators. We, like Thomas said, we come up with the initial impulse, but these people are artisans as well. And so what comes back is definitely their influence and their history and their experience. And so it's a nice collaboration. We like to work harmoniously with people, and we don't like to work in ways where it feels, where there's ego or agenda, or, dispute over money or time. So we've been really, really lucky to find a whole group of people who share this. and we respect them and they respect us, and the result that comes out is really, really rich, and we love it. It becomes in itself, as we've been talking about, its own art piece.
Well, and it's nice, when you can take the clients along. They really love it. Because it's not just ours or the artist, that becomes theirs too, because they are seeing it made or make changes to it. I don't know. Or get a choice, With the lamps we had, the artist made multiple lamps and they got to choose, and that was a treat as well.
Yeah, it was fun.
So you already found yourself a community here of artists, but also...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's getting harder because the island is very busy, and obviously we're not that protective about our sources, so, we post them, we promote them, but then they get busy too, So it's tricky. And the people that are really good and local, they do get busy now, so you have to have even more time than before.
Well, that's so nice what you said already. And before we go into the final part of our interview, where I have 3 questions for each of you, I just wanted to ask if there is anything more you want to add to the beautiful talk we already had.
I think, for people who are listening to this, to understand, obviously our story is unique, and everyone who's gotten to this point in their lives, I think it's important to challenge yourself and to think about if there's an impulse, just a teeny tiny one, about that you might want to do life differently. You might want to slow down. You might want to maybe take the path that was not intended for you. It's possible, and it's affordable, and it's realistic. You make your own reality. We've made a lot of changes since we were in New York. And again, this is not all rosy. It has taken time, and to de-accustomize yourself to maybe living with a little less money, with leaving your community, but building a new one. And we all have choices, and I think we're very lucky because we're obviously very like-minded. We make choices every day to make this work, to protect our pace, to make sure that it doesn't get interrupted, to stop and smell the roses. Again, very cliche, but we see so much beauty every day, and it's a choice to slow down. And I think it's possible. And with planning and support of a community, support of family and friends, and your new community, if you choose to leave your homeland, I feel like we're a success story, because
I think we should encourage people to do it.
Yeah,
I want to encourage people to do it. I know it sounds scary, but nothing is irreversible, except a kid, maybe, So there's always a way to go back. And a lot of people have talked about the fear of, like, oh my God, if I don't work for a year or two, and then I come back, nobody's going to want me because I'm not up to date anymore. And that is absolutely not the case. I can tell you from my own previous life, where I was a manager and hiring people, that I would hire somebody who has taken a risk for a year and tried something different over somebody else. I would hire somebody who has actually had other experiences than just their work experience over somebody else. I think it makes you more valuable, not less valuable.
Well, thanks for the insight of a manager as well. That's good to hear.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. If you do, you do something crazy for a year, that makes you more valuable because you have a different perspective. And it's not like, oh my God, you haven't, you don't know latest programming language because you have been away for a year. It's like, that stuff you can catch up with, you know. Life and life experience you can't catch up with.
Yeah, but it's good to see, hear what you just said, because I think these are questions people ask themselves a lot, and we are all in that race in in our business world, and it's hard to have the bravery to step out of it and do something completely different. And that's, it's, you go into a completely new way of life, which can be scary.
Don't be afraid to have a gap in your resume, right? Because I don't think that's a negative. I think that's a positive. And a lot of other managers we know, they think the same way. They think it's positive. Oh my God, you were away for a month or 2 or a year. That doesn't make you less valuable. It makes you more valuable.
Well, and the things that we see and that we learn. I mean, you take a month off and you go learn how to be a DJ in Tokyo, or you go to Argentina and you learn how to, cook beef on the parrilla, and you go to Asia and you drive on the different side of the road on a scooter, and all of these things are life experiences that make you much more open-minded, much more accepting of all other cultures and how things are done differently. Yes, absolutely. Those are the people that I want around me. They bring a diversity and they bring experience that's very different than the conventional.
Yeah, that's really uplifting, and
do it.
That's how we.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, do it.
Yeah.
I can absolutely go
Just
with that.
do it.
Just do it. Yeah.
And I see you are a really good example of, people who made the steps, who got all the way, and who are living a really successful life here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we don't have the same salaries that we had before, that's for sure. I mean, you live with a lot less money, but a much richer life.
Yes, and I think that's also what life is about. No? I mean, it's not just about collecting a pile of money, but also living life itself with your senses.
Yeah.
Well, before we finish off our interview, I got 3 questions for each of you, and you can answer them as you like to, brief or elaborate on them. The first one would be, how would you define a transformer?
Well, in your words, I would say a brave person, someone who has the bravery to do things differently and to not only make a change, but be a part of the change and stick with the change to move from point A to point Z, really. I think it takes a brave person to be a transformer, but also a very celebrated person.
Well, and I guess this, you can transform yourself and you can transform the world around you, or, even in a partnership, you can transform the relationship by doing something different. And I think that's what defines that, and like Melissa said, it's a brave person, but also, very open-minded person. And what you get from it, I think, is a life experience by transforming your life, that is extremely valuable. But you do have to be, it's not for everybody, I guess. My nephew, who were just talking, he doesn't even want to leave his village, it makes him uncomfortable and he needs the safety of it. So I think you need to have a little courage to transform your own life. And you need to be okay with making mistakes, and having it be a path, and it's definitely a path.
The second question I got, which I will start off with you, Thomas, is what is your slow ritual?
My slow ritual? Oh my God. What is not slow? No, Well, we both like our slow mornings, and it's a bit of a ritual of how you enter the day with a little bit of a meditation or, just having a tea. We have a beautiful outside terrace space that's covered, so it's usable all year round. So we just sit on the terrace and we listen to the birds and we have a tea, and we don't like to really go into the day very fast, and if we have to, then it's usually makes for a very different day. So I think the slow morning start, is very important for me.
Yeah, no. I echo that sentiment exactly. We recently hung a hammock on the porch. And it's just my happy place. And every morning to grab a cup of tea or coffee and fold up into the hammock with the coffee, listening to the birds, it's just the best way to start the day.
Yeah, and I mean, we're also, we have a dog now. That's new for us, having animals. I mean, we had dogs before, but this really is amazing too. We go for a long walk in the morning, usually after our tea or coffee, and we'll go for an hour walk in the mountains. So you're in nature in the morning, and it's like your own little meditation.
Yeah. No, we're in the woods and we're smelling the trees, and I take pictures of all of the flowers, and it is our morning ritual to be with her, to be in nature, and take everything that it gives us. I love the birds.
That sounds really good to me as well. And the last question, if you can have a cup of coffee with someone from past or present, who would you choose? Melissa?
Oh, goodness. Wow. I listened to a podcast about Georgia O'Keeffe and the home and the sanctuary that she created in New Mexico. And she built the house with a view to a certain mountain. It's not a mountain, it's a plateau. And the visual that was created around her life and her rituals and her slow living and her painting and the colors that came to her made me immediately go look up and Google pictures of this beautiful home that she had. And I'm very curious about her, not necessarily about her paintings, but about her life and how she lived a slow life and how she took inputs from this beautiful desert. So I would say Georgia O'Keeffe. I want to know more about her love of this landscape and these colors. She seemed like such a an interesting person, and I feel like I could learn so much from her, and how she took the inspiration from nature into her work. And I'd love to know more about that.
No, I mean, I would probably want to talk to somebody in the art or, crafts design world. I want to know how other people make, because it's very much about the process of making. And, I love to meet somebody local here, like, John Miro or somebody, artists that have worked here in our neighborhood and that are famous and, we've seen a lot of, because, they had a bunch of his stuff in the Espanyolet here in the local museum. And yes, somebody like him. Or I also, we have a friend who came here many, many moons ago with his parents, and his father was an archaeologist. Yeah. And they were doing, archaeological excavations here in Mallorca. I mean, he is now dead, but that would also be a fun person to talk to about, how do you do that in Mallorca? I mean, I like the local stuff and I like the making, so.
It's always hard to choose, yes. But both people seem, or all of them seem to be interesting characters to have a coffee with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for your time, and the interesting interview with
Yeah,
you here.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I hope this is interesting and helpful somehow.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
That's all for this episode. If you want to follow our dream to create our own slow hotel, you can now follow us on Instagram or YouTube on Crafting Transformation. We hope you listen in next time as well. Until then, craft your ideas, transform the future.